and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Headlines. This evening we are unpacking some of the measures announced by Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, the Honorable Dr. Keith Mitchell, last evening in a national address. I am pleased to present our panelists this evening, the private sector representative in the Senate, Mr. Christy Ali, and career banker and financial analyst, Mr. Michael Ponte Archibald. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you for having us, Odette, and good evening to your viewers.
Yes, Odette, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, great. So we are going to be looking Grenada in the next, let's say, 12 weeks as we look ahead to the reopening of the economy, seemingly in phases as announced by the Prime Minister last evening. And he did announce, one of the measures he announced was the fact that every day now is a business day. So, Mr. Diali, you want to start us off by looking at some of the things that stuck out at you as a result of the address?
Sure, I'm happy to do so. I expected the Prime Minister to give us a little leeway and opening up of the economy because, as you know, the limited state of emergency and to some effect the full state of emergency when we started at the end of March, 23rd of March to be precise, had certainly put the economy into a tailspin. But of course, I supported the view that lives were more important than livelihoods, which I still do. And I believe that based on the progress we have made in terms of the tracking of the COVID-19, the rate of infections, and the fact that our curve has been flattening more so than on an upward trajectory, there must come a time when we must look at opening back up the economy in a very controlled manner so that business could start back, government could get their taxes and revenues. So the fact that the Prime Minister moved from approximately 3 days for some businesses in the country last week to 5 days is a welcome move, and a lot of us in the private sector believe that this is something that is welcomed, and we hope that it will continue. Of course, a lot is dependent on the public health situation and how that improves or does not improve. So we hope that with this opening up, gradual opening up in various sectors, that the economy will slowly start coming back to a place where we could be comfortable.
Mr. Archibald, one of the first set of businesses that were allowed to open about 3 weeks ago, banks. You're a career banker. You'd always be a banker, although you're not in active duty and service. And so they're going to be 5 days now as compared to 2. Your thoughts on this new phase that we've entered, apparently?
I think let's just go back to when the banks were allowed to open. We have to remember that everything takes money. Life these days takes money. Food takes money. Everything takes money. And the banks is where the monies are located and lodged. So they had to be one of the earlier places or earlier businesses open. And I think it was right to do so. The steps, the gradual opening of the economy, in my view, is necessary. The economy was devastated, as economies around the world was devastated. And the government has to walk a very, very narrow tightrope to ensure that they don't open too quickly, at the same time to ensure that they open to allow the economy to pick back up gradually, as Mr. Diali said. And I think at this stage, it is fair to say that we are doing the right things. We are opening gradually, step by step, until we get the whole economy back in full strength. But I want to emphasize, too many people seem to be expecting that at the end of this lockdown, at the end of the phase, that everything will be simply back to normal. And I want to say that it is not going to be back to normal for at least another 18 months and even longer than that. But we have to open. It is important that we open, and the steps that we are taking gradually are the right steps.
Mr. Archibald, you're saying that it won't be business as usual for another 18 months, and that just scared the living daylights of some people. You want to explain what you mean by that? Break that down a little bit?
If you listen to the press and all that has been said in the press, that we won't get a vaccine for at least 14 to 18 months. This virus is not going away. According to all the medical experts, it is not going away. We are going to have to learn to live with the virus. until we get something they call herd immunity. I think that's the right term I hear used. And we have a virus. In the meantime, we're going to have to behave differently. I suspect that we're going to have to keep the social distancing and those sort of changes ongoing for at least another 12 months, going on 14 months. For instance, a business has opened on Monday or reopened on Monday, but the employees of that business will simply go back into the business and behave as before. Would be wrong, would be a mistake, and could very well throw us back into the hands of the virus again. So I'm saying you're going to go back out to work, but it's going to be important that we maintain all the protocols that were established. And the difficulty in my mind over the next few months is to ensure that that people behave and maintain the protocols that were established.
Mr. Diali, I'm coming back to you in a while, but let me just state Mr. Archibald on a point here. Mr. Archibald, Chartered Accountant Henry Joseph this morning was on GBN's To The Point program. He made a comment that made me sit up and think. He mentioned the opening of banks, and he related it to the reopening of schools, and he said that whenever schools are in session, bankers will tell you that there is some uptick in activity, and vice versa. When the schools are closed, you see some kind of lowering of activity. Can you tell us what dynamic is at play here?
I'm not so sure what dynamic Mr. George was referring to. When the schools are open, the roads are busier. The buses are filled, there's more activity on the streets. You can see more activity on the streets. And I'm assuming that it means that once there's more activity on the streets, there will be more activity in the banks. But I can't be certain as to what he was getting.
And I guess when schools are open, I think he was making the larger point that when schools are open, so for instance, in that July, August term, people need cash to get school books, uniforms, that kind of thing.
Yes, I mean, schools are open. The children are buying stuff. You have to buy stuff for them. All these things cost money. You have to put clothing on them. You have to put shoes on them. You have to buy books for them. All this affects the economy in a very positive way. And all that money is circulated through the banking system.
Okay. Mr. Diali, let's try to unpack some of what was said last night, and we have some slides to help us. And the first thing is to look at what now is every day is a business day and the opening hours. So the producer is going to try to assist us with those slides in a little bit. So every day is a business day for businesses already granted permission to operate, and those resuming this week. Construction was one of those highlighted. The approved businesses will operate their respective pre-COVID schedules within the allotted time frame, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., and the daily curfew remains in place. Mr. Diali, your thoughts here?
Well, I think the opening back up of construction is an important economic activity. Government did signal that part of the process to get back economic activities to engage the public sector investment program. I think Minister Bowen indicated that there were a number of projects in play that they needed to complete and get people working on these projects. And of course, there are a lot of private sector projects in play as well. So the opening up of construction and the construction industry is important from 2 points: to generate employment and to generate economic activity. And the second one is we're coming very close to the end of the dry season, and we're heading into the hurricane/rainy season. And a lot of the projects that probably will be in foundation stage or those type of stages need to come out as quickly as possible, because when the rain starts, it's going to be far more difficult to complete that stage of the project. So it is important, based from a time perspective and from the perspective of having that sector get back so that economic activity could happen. The only concern here to me is the transportation aspect and the public sector transport that wasn't spoken of in the speech, and the fact that the Prime Minister said that that will be coming in a few days' time, because the problem or the issue of getting workers to projects and to sites is going to be an issue. For now, I think contractors have been asked to use their vehicles, their trucks, their open back pickups and so on, and exercise the social distancing protocols so that employees can get to their project sites. But the issue of public transport is going to be a big thing for other businesses where workers live outside of St. George's, those who have to come to St. George's and other places, and the use of public transport and how we use it. In Trinidad, I noticed recently Prime Minister in Trinidad decided that public transport will be opened up to a point of 50% capacity. If you were to use that kind of approach in Grenada, a bus that licensed for 18 people would then be allowed to use 9 people, and you could achieve some level of social distancing in that. The big question becomes, would it be economically viable for a bus from Grenville or Sotez to run with 9 people up and down, and the cost involved? So there are some issues there that we have to work out. In fact, in terms of the curfew remaining from 7 p.m. to 5, again, that is in place to ensure that people don't abuse the issue of gatherings and doing things in the night where you have groups coming together and we cooking and we drinking and having fetes on the beaches and so on. So I believe the curfew from 7 to 5 is again to exercise some level of control in terms of the public health aspect, because we have to make sure that we have control on the public health aspect. As Mr. Archibald just said, we will go back to where we were. And I do support most of the points Mr. Archibald made in terms of time, especially for the tourism industry and what is going to happen there. The Prime Minister also indicated in his speech that we're planning to open up our borders to some degree in June. And that, again, is something that we have to look at carefully and how it is done for regional travel. So there's a lot of things here at play, but I believe, as I said earlier, the public health aspect is critical, and we need to understand the impacts of that and how it's going to impact the economy as we do this phase opening of the economy.
But if I may,
go ahead.
Just a comment on the point just made by Chris. I think the whole matter of the public transportation and the buses is one of the larger or bigger challenges facing the government and facing the reopening of the economy. Because in opening the economy, by opening businesses, the employees of the various businesses have to get to work. And by and large, they get to work through the buses, the public transportation system. It is also a problem because all these people are sitting very close to each other in the confines of a bus. So the question is, how do we get all these people back to work using the public system without endangering or causing a return of the virus, as they say in the United States, a second wave of the virus? And I think that is one of the bigger challenges, and probably why the Prime Minister did not enunciate anything yesterday on his speech. In fact, said that they were still looking at it, as Mr. Dialli said, because I think that is one of the bigger challenges, and one they need to look at that very, very carefully.
So the government did say, as we saw, it's working with the stakeholders to develop the appropriate social distancing and hygienic measures, and that an official announcement will be made in the coming days. Is it possible that they had promised some kind of relief to the bus drivers and owners, and hence they probably still want to firm that up? Do you see, Mr. Dialli, anything a probability there?
No, well, I know that when the Prime Minister announced his package after the crisis hit, that bus drivers were paid, those especially in the tourism industry, I think a flat amount of $800 to assist with the lack of activity that were happening. I suppose in this discussion, or where we open back up in a phase way, as I indicated, if you ask a busman to travel at 50% capacity, licensed for 18 passengers, you're asking him to move 9 people. And 9 people from Sotez or St. Andrews or St. David's or the western side to St. George may not be a profitable thing. So the Prime Minister's team, I suspect the Ministry of Finance, may be working around some sort of financial package to assist with that as well. So it will take a little more time to come to the public transport, private transport system we have in Grenada to get that reasonable. So it really is, as Mr. Archibald indicated, it really is not a simple thing, and it has to be carefully crafted, because at the end of the day, we need to get workers to our sites to work, and that is a critical thing for us. I mean, in my business, I am now having to look at that issue in a serious way, and whether we could stand the cost of moving staff from extremes of the north of the island to the south. and it is really an area of serious concern for us in business. Because if you take, for example, the supermarkets and some of the bigger businesses that operate with a large contingent of staff, even some of the construction sites, to move staff and to move personnel could be very costly. So it's something that we really have to pay attention to, because you could open back up for 5 days a week, and if you don't have staff, business can't operate. So we really need to pin that one down and get it reasonable. I mean, everybody have to make sacrifices in this situation, businesses, staff, and the busmen. So all of us have to come together and try and get on a place or on a page where all of us could have reasonably operate and get workers to move.
Mr. Archibald, we tried to make a correlation between the uptick in the economy that the Prime Minister said he's working toward. What, in your estimation, is the dollar value? And you don't have to use dollar value, that's just an operative phrase. How important, in other words, is the construction sector to the economy in Grenada?
I think Mr. Dialli might have the actual percentage for that sector, but I think it is known that the construction sector is very, very important for the success and the growth of our economy. It is one of those sectors that is intertwined with all the other sectors. For instance, it is intertwined with the tourism sector, because the construction of hotels, etc., is intertwined with residential construction, is intertwined with business construction. So it fits in so many different ways, number one. Number two, it employs a lot of people. And number three, it employs people from all the various levels of society. It is one of the industries that we claim, the economists say, has a huge multiplier impact, in that it has a bigger impact on the economy than you would think at first, because it affects and touches so many different parts of the economy.
And to just add to what Michael have just said, the aspect of construction being used as a short-term economic driver, because of the implications for all the various areas in society that it touches, is an important thing. And if you remember, Odette, when the Prime Minister presented his 2020 budget, a large part of that budget, I think was 200 million or more, involved a public sector investment program, where the government intended to spend quite a lot of money in a lot of different projects to get the economy growing and continuing to grow at the rate that it normally would, which is around 5%. So, I mean, and even in this COVID environment, the Prime Minister have indicated that through his Minister of Works, Honorable Minister Bowen, that at least this PSIP program for road projects and so on will continue, and they will try to ensure that they could move some of the money, some of the larger projects which probably would have been stalled, into smaller PSIP program projects, so that, as Pointy indicated, as Michael indicated, you could get employment going, get economic activity going. And you know, when construction workers are working, a lot of things happen. Bars operate, a lot of stuff go on, and it's a good thing. Yeah, it's a good thing.
It is spread right through the entire country, because a lot of the construction workers are in fact from the countryside, and they come from various villages. So when they go back home, they start to spend in the village, and the whole cycle of the spending of money starts. And that's why that industry is so important.
And let me just correlate it to another one. The fact that the tourism industry is expected to be out for quite a long time, based on what is happening in external countries, not ours, the traditional markets like the US, Canada, and the UK, and what is happening with them and the management of their COVID crisis. We expect our tourism industry in its traditional pre-COVID times to be out for quite a long time. Today I was reading an article on the cruise industry, and the cruise industry, based on what we're seeing, is not expected to come back for another long period of time, probably 18 months or more, as Mr. Archibald was indicating earlier. So with that sector of the economy, which accounts for 20-25% of our economy, I mean, you must find something else to get people working and to get people employed. And construction in the short term will be that, coupled with things like agriculture and CBI and some of the other services, education services. But even in education services, EDU, SGU, we have a challenge as well because of the source markets where the students are coming from and the situation with their COVID management. So we are challenged. But two major sectors, tourism and education services, impacted severely. So we have to find other areas to generate income and generate employment for the country.
You know, one of my biggest concerns is, in fact, the tourism sector. I have this view. If you look at how tourism is structured, I was saying in another interview, how tourism is structured is that we pack all these people into these long tubes that we call airplanes. And they sit jammed to each other. And we bring them from the source market to a destination, i.e. Grenada. Then they come from the jammed together in these tubes, they go into large buildings, mainly hotels. The impact that this COVID has had on the airline industry, we are hearing that discussion now is about having one passenger per row of seats. That is not economically viable. If that is what it evolves to, it means that we won't get the volumes that we were getting in the past, because the planes, the airline industry would not be able to carry the volumes if they follow the social protocol of the distancing between the various passengers. That could have quite a serious impact unless some solution is found for that. And you link that with the cruise industry and all that has happened. We've been reading about what has been happening on the cruise liners and the impact that the COVID-19 has had on the cruise industry. If we therefore have difficulties in the cruise industry over the next 18 months, and we have difficulty in getting the tourists to the destination in Grenada over the next 18 months, unless some bright new change comes about, the impact on our tourism industry could be long-lasting. And we might start to think that the type of hotel that we're using might have to change. And I'm just throwing thoughts out. For instance, the only caveat to that is if a vaccine comes and the vaccine could bring back the confidence of people to travel in the airline industry, first of all, and to come to destinations. And a lot of hotels are looking at that, and they're looking at their protocols to adjust to accommodate some level. There are discussions now about going after the super rich, the people who could come in their private plane, their private yacht, and be in a controlled environment from airport to the limousine to the hotel, and have exclusivity in such a way that you could still have some of that, and of course with all the health protocols in place. So there is some avenue, but I mean, it has to be carefully managed and looked at as we open it up gradually. But the real issue is confidence to travel and to fly, because nobody wants to be in a plane next to somebody that they think. And that's precisely my point, Chris.
That's right.
Unless something significant changes, and going after the super rich might be one of the things we might have to do. But my point is that you can't just expect things to return to normal to how it was in the past. I don't think that will happen.
Agreed. Mass tourism will be severely impacted.
Yeah, and even though we get a vaccine in the next 12 months, and it's discovered in the next 12 months, when is that vaccine going to hit everybody around the world? It is going to take another year. So I'm saying we have to look for 12, 18 months of change. And the tourism industry should be looking at new methods rather than seeing us just continue, hoping that things will just continue how it was.
And Mr. Dial, if I could interject here and help us, because we've been looking at construction and then we branched off into tourism because all of these industries are related. If we could situate the other, there's what is called reopening this week, and there is this subset, and if you can help us going back to reopening this week, that of real estate services, laundromats.
They have laundromats, landscapers, gardeners,
flower shops, consumer credit stores, and companies offering payday loans. So there you have it, the real estate services, laundromats, landscapers and gardeners, flower shops, consumer credit stores, companies offering payday loans. Some people think these were picked out of a hat. What say you? I'm certain, Mr. Archibald, you see the correlation. Mr. Diali, you see the correlation. Explain to us why those are important at this time.
I'll leave that one with Chris.
I suspect what they were trying to do here is to give a kind of wide association of businesses, because there was a lot of complaints about landscapers, for example, couldn't come out and cut lawns and so on. And these people work daily. Some of them have contracts weekly and so on. So the fact that you could get a trickle along to some sectors like landscapers and gardeners. Again, flower shops, I mean, put together bouquets, and whether it's for weddings or funerals or whatever the case may be, and to get to the field, to get the flowers, it is really a grassroots sector. So I suspect part of the issue was getting monies to grassroots people. The obvious criticism here would be the people for nails, so that do fingernails and hairdressers and these kind of people, barber shops and so on, that you're not seen on the list, and probably is the government is still with the COVID committee trying to see how you could get that back operational with the social distancing. If a barber had to cut your hair or a hairdresser have to do your hair, you ain't have no social distancing there. The most that you could hope for is both parties wearing their masks and sanitizing before and after, and ensuring that all the equipment and so on. But if you're operating in an air-conditioned environment, you need to understand what are the protocols that need to be exercised in that environment if somebody was to cough, if somebody was to sneeze, and all of those things. So the control of the environment in these very close-up businesses is a challenge. And I suspect that is why you have not seen those on the list. But when you look at the list, I think it's wide enough and long enough so that it could affect people from consumer credit stores. I suspect that will be stores like furniture stores and where you could go and get credit, the traditional ones that we know in Grenada. And of course, landscapers. So it's two different levels, but it's across a spectrum where possibly you could affect quite a number of workers to come out and get some sort of income. That is how I'm reading it when you look at the variety that is there.
Mr. Archibald, I know you tossed it to Chris, but I'm asking you to probably help us understand why companies offering payday loans.
Again, it's a matter of getting money into circulation. It's pretty much what Chris said. The payday loans, people come to these payday loan businesses to get money to spend right away for all their various needs. So it's a matter of getting things back in circulation again. Similarly to the banks, you want to get money in circulation. And I think Chris is right with regard to the nail technicians and the hairdressers and the barbers. And the problem there is the social distancing and the solution to that.
Well, you know, I wasn't thinking all along. I was forced when Chris said that to start to look at, you know, certain hairstyles in the room. Mr. Archibald, I think you're exempted in the commercial break. I want to take a closer look at Chris's haircut, so we'll see what's been happening there. Probably he has a good pair of scissors and a good pair of hands. This is Beyond the Headlines on GBN Television. Bernadine Anne-Marie Roberts joining us from the United States. We're seeing you. Thanks for joining us, and all of you joining us in the diaspora at home and abroad. We say this is Beyond the Headlines. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I'm reaching my dreams with GOT. They're the ones for me. I'm reaching my dreams with GOT. They're the ones for me. Since 1983, they've been serving the country, and we like all their financing, giving the people what they want, what they need, what they love. Come and join the family that's here for you all the way, from birth to graduation, your first job to your home, and your car through your golden years.
The GT Credit Union has been actively supporting nation building through its many sponsorships and the programs including Financial Literacy Quiz, Pass the Torch Calypso Program, Junior Cooperatives in Secondary Schools, CPEA, and the TAPCC Grants. The credit union has helped many people make their dreams come true. Let them help you with yours. You don't have to be a teacher to be a member. So what are you waiting for?
GUT Credit Union, it's where you belong.
Dear customer, please help us limit the potential impact of COVID-19. If you have cold, flu, or COVID-19 symptoms, please postpone your visit to Grenlec and ask someone you trust to do your business for you. We recommend using online banking to make payments, available through Co-op Bank, Republic Bank, and FCIB. You can also use check drop boxes at each of our locations. For bill balances and other information, call 237. For additional support, email customersupport@grenlec.com. If you choose to visit, you may have to wait outside because of the social distancing requirements. Our service may be slow, so please be patient with us. Have your account number handy to expedite service. Wishing you, your family, and employees health and wellness at this time.
Get Rubigas. Get cooking. Rubigas, clean, safe, and reliable LPG is the perfect solution for your commercial and everyday needs. For cooking at home or barbecuing, choose Rubigas LPG cylinders. Available in a variety of sizes from 20 to 100-pound cylinders. Rubigas LPG, clean, safe, reliable. Are you cooking with Rubigas?
Get Rubis, get going.
To Beyond the Headlines. This evening we're speaking with the private sector representative in the Senate, Mr. Cristiali, and career banker and finance expert, Mr. Michael Ponte Archibald. Chris, I think you got a passing grade on that haircut, that COVIDious haircut, Blossom Alexis Welch would call it.
Thank you, Odette.
Well done.
Thank you, Odette.
So one of the things that the Prime Minister announced, and some people gave a loud whoop, was to the re-establishment of ferry services. There had been a lull in movement between the islands and among the islands. So he said limited ferry services have been approved for reopening this week between mainland Grenada and the two sister islands, working with the service providers on the operational guidelines. And I'm leaving that right there to hang. Who's taking it up?
Well, I could start by saying that, again, the ferry services will be challenged with the social distancing protocols and running the ferries at a price or at a cost that could be profitable for the operators. So again, the discussions with government on how we do this and what we do, ensuring that the health protocols are in place, is a challenge. Because normally on the ferries, we all come together very close to get maximum passengers so that you could run at a profitable price. So at the end of the day, it has to be something that needs to be controlled and worked out. And I suspect why the word limited is used, because you can't have them running as normal as they used to be. I think it's 2 or 3 times a day. Probably it will be limited to one movement with the social protocols and so being put in place to facilitate. But I mean, it is crucial for some level of transportation to occur between the sister islands and the main island, especially for health reasons, supply reasons, and whatever other main issues that are involved, and full services not offered on the sister isles. So I mean, you must have some level of transport and movement for the ordinary citizens so that they could handle their businesses. So I suspect that is where it is coming from.
And one thing the Prime Minister did not mention last night, but came out subsequently, it came out this evening, the reopening of beaches. Who is the beach person here? Mr. Archibald, you?
Well, I had a group and we went to the beach every afternoon. Every day, every afternoon, and we sorely missed our visits to the beach. So when I saw that come out this afternoon, I was very pleased.
But
the difficulty is only at mornings.
Right? You can't do it in the afternoon. It's in the morning.
Can't do it in the afternoons, yes. So I was very pleased to see that one. I hope they bring out the afternoons shortly. And again, it comes back to what was said. we have, when we go out, we must remember social distancing. We must remember the new protocols. My biggest fear in all of this, in reopening the economy, is that people do not behave sensibly.
Yes.
That's my biggest fear. Because if people do not behave sensibly, we can go right back and lose all the gains we have made over the last 2 months. I think Grenada has handled the virus very well up to this point. But we are seeing the behavior of some people, and the police have been given extra work, really, just by some people being rebellious for no reason and not really thinking about the danger, not only to themselves, but the danger to others. So I'm saying all of this to say we must reopen the economy. We have to do it in a phased manner. We are doing that. But one of the bigger challenges in all of this is making sure that the protocols are maintained. And that, I think, is a significant challenge.
Odette, I want to add something to what Michael Pointy Archibald is saying, and to say that, management of this virus and the crisis and the environment is a big part of it is us, the people. The virus doesn't spread. It spread mainly 90+% from human to human contact and from human to human movement. Yes, you have the surfaces, and yes, you have issues with the virus to live on a surface for a particular time. But the main area of transmission is from human to human and our behavior. And we must accept responsibility for that as people and be our brother's keeper. And I want to signal something here. I know we cancel Carnival and we cancel Regatta, but there are some of us in some villages and some little nooks and crannies that are still want to play jab when the time comes. And it's going to put extra stress on the police force to ensure that people are not gathering and behaving in a manner that could create and bring us back to the point where the COVID crisis becomes an issue. And as Pointy said in the beginning of this program, we have to learn to live with COVID. COVID, I believe, is here to stay. We may get a vaccine, and some of us will get vaccinated. Some of us will develop immunities through the herd immunity syndrome, but it's here to stay. And when you look at the science and the rate at which this thing mutates, there will be various strains that are going to come, and vaccines will change and probably come just as how we have flu shots every year. But it's going to be here, and we have to learn to live with it and exhibit responsibility in our behavior. Because if we don't, what the public health people have not said to you, and they will probably say to you, we cannot deal with 100 people being infected in a couple of days. The system can't take it. And that is part of the problem, the speed at which the infection may come and overwhelm the system. The fact that we can manage it and handle a few people at a time and see them come through and quarantine and so on, you could imagine if we get a surge of 500 people being affected as it was in St. Catherine in Jamaica. We won't be able to handle it, and this public health system won't be able to handle it. And I think that is what we have to think about as Grenadians as we engage in irresponsible behavior. We have to say it loud and clear. A lot of us have to exercise responsibility in our behavior to keep this crisis manageable.
And as we progress toward the economic impact, and the Prime Minister spoke about the loss of revenue, but let's segue into that by looking at Spice Mask probably quickly. And he did speak to the fact that Spice Mask has been cancelled, and he said it is the same rationale, and that of putting people's health first influenced the decision to cancel Spice Mask. He's made it very clear that you cannot compromise people's health, safety, and well-being. So in as much as, Grenadian culture has been put on pause, your thoughts on the cancellation of Spice Mask?
We have no choice. It had to be done. If you think back, after every carnival,
that's right,
we have some sort of flu or something, and people are sick. They're sneezing, et cetera, et cetera. After every carnival, why? It's the influx of people, and all it takes is one person to arrive with something, go to a show, and it starts to spread. If that happens with this particular virus, imagine what would happen to Grenada. So I think the government and the Spice Mask Corporation had no choice. And the impact is not only going to be on Carnival. Carnival is Spice Mask is our showpiece. but it's going to impact all our cultural events because most of our cultural events, we get together in crowds.
So, Mr. Archibald, the economic impact of this decision, and nobody is against the decision. I've not heard anybody rise up against the decision. But let's take all of these companies, these creative people who depend on Carnival. How much revenues are we losing? So you have some businesses which, probably 90% of their revenues are based on Carnival. So you want to look and delve into the economic impact there?
The impact of the economic impact of Carnival is huge. And I think a study was done and it was in excess of $20 million. And Chris, I think it was in excess of $20 million in circulation at Carnival.
Around the time, yeah.
Right?
When you look at it,
one of the good things about it, like the construction industry, it is spread throughout the country at various levels, from the vendor on the side of the road to the creative people making the costumes, etc., etc., etc. So it is very good in that way because it spreads to everybody. It is very significant. And you're not going to be able to replace it just like that. You can't replace a whole of $20 million or $25 million. And so it is one of the challenges we face again in trying to bring the economy back to recover the damage that this virus has done.
And you mentioned $25 million, and let's go right into the heart of the lion, the economic performance. The Prime Minister mentioned last evening that he's projecting, he said, from projections for an 8th consecutive year of growth, government is now facing the stark reality of negative growth, triggered largely by the significant impact on tourism, construction, and education. And education, I suppose, here dealing with SGU. This has resulted in a drastic decline in government revenue. In April, for example, the combined revenue collection by Customs and Internal Revenue Division dropped by about $30 million compared to that of 2019. And
in 1 month?
Sorry?
Isn't that in 1 month?
In 1 month alone, yes, in April alone.
Yes.
And the decline is likely to be replicated across main revenue generating departments over the next few months. And gentlemen, that's your forte. It's over to you.
Well, I mean, Odette, the Prime Minister, remember one of the major intake in the tax system is VAT and the collection of VAT. You have corporation taxes, you have land tax, you have stamp tax and so on. But with stamp tax, corporation tax, and VAT, all three are linked, and they are linked to business and business activity and economic activity. So if there is no real economic activity and businesses bringing in containers across the ports for VAT to be collected and for the ordinary shopper to pay VAT, there's a huge shortfall in the revenues, both on the customs side and on collection of VAT and so on. Then if you come to businesses who are not operating, take, for example, the tourism sector, where 90% or more of the businesses in the tourism sector is not doing any business. They have no stamp tax to pay and they have no corporation tax, so government will be not getting any of those taxes. So the only one that is going to probably continue is licensing, and you're paying for your vehicles, and of course, some degree of your land tax, which is minuscule in the total revenue collection of the country. Remember, government has a $22 million wage bill to pay every month. So they have to find money or lay off public servants in order to meet their wage bill. So at the end of the day, losing $30 million a month immediately speaks to the wage bill, right there, and how we could afford to pay it. And we have to find money from other sources to pay these bills that will come up every month. In business, we call them fixed costs. No matter what you do, the costs are there. So you have to find money and you burn cash. So that is it. That is the take. And that is why I think in the Prime Minister's opening paragraph, he talked about microeconomy and balancing that with the public health crisis and bringing it back slowly. Because the fact that we could generate economic activity, whether it's through construction or other sectors like agriculture, where you will be getting some activity internally, which will generate some VAT payments, it will generate some other payments for businesses like stamp tax and so on that will help in the government coffers. But I'm certain, even with the phase opening, the government will be challenged for the next 6 months, probably right toward the end of the year, to get their revenues back up to pre-COVID levels. Because as you know, as we just said, tourism, a major sector, and education, a major sector, is out. When we have students here, 3,000 plus, the amount of economic activity they generate, both in the food sector, the rental sector, apartment buildings, and foreign exchange, is a huge impact for the economy. And that is not easily replaced.
You know, I don't want to be a spoilsport here, but Chris, those revenues are not going to come back to quote unquote pre-COVID levels over the next 12 months.
Agreed. Pointy, I'm not disagreeing with you.
You mentioned December, but you know, you're looking at next 2 years, and combine what you just said on the revenue side with the demands now that governments have faced on the expenses side. So you have a $30 million shortfall coming in on the revenue side on 1 month, and I'm sure it's more than that. While at the same time, everybody's looking to government now for a bailout of one kind or the other.
That's right.
And I'm not against that. Government has to do it. That is fine. All I'm saying is combine the two of them. Significant shortfall of revenues on one side, and on the other side, government now has to step in. And I don't care which government it is. They have to step in. We're talking about support for salary support. We're talking about bus drivers. We're talking about farmers. Everybody is seeking some sort of assistance from the government. And the government has to step up and do it. I think they have to make sure that they pay those monies out to those people who truly deserve. That's my only caveat. But they have to do it. So I'm saying, that you have on the one side the revenue short declining significantly, precipitously, and at the same time on the other side, your expenses going up dramatically. So government is in a very, very, very difficult position, and one wonders where these resources are going to come from. These resources are going to have to come from outside. And the fact that we had significantly reduced our debt, et cetera, it puts us in a better position at this time to access some of these resources.
We could actually fast track through two of the other slides because it speaks directly to that. And the Prime Minister did say that they would have to seek some kind of external financing. Looking at the way forward, that's one of the slides that we have, the way forward. The government, he said, is utilizing its reserves. It's seeking international help to finance any deficits and bring relief. It has attracted funding from the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the European Union, the government of India, the ECCB, the CDB, among others, and it continues to look at other sources for grant and soft loan financing, as well as exploring options for debt relief. But as Mr. Henry Joseph pointed out this morning, that's not free money.
Well, I agree and I disagree to some degree because the grant part of the money is free, but the soft loan part, of course, is not free. But
the interest rates, I think, Chris, are quite low.
Quite low, probably 1-2%, and the huge moratoriums on payment and when you pay. But a lot of that is dependent on the strength of your economy. The fact that the IMF released money to us already, Odette, is a good sign because a lot of the other lending agencies, what the Prime Minister didn't say is that those other lending agencies like the World Bank and the CDB and so on, they look to see what the IMF has done. And the IMF would only do things because they believe in some of the strengths that the economy have or the gains the economy made in the last few years. And once they release money, the other lending agencies and the other agencies would look to assist as well. But a lot of these monies are grant monies. I said in my speech in the Senate that, first of all, I believe they should have doubled the package from 50 million to 100 million. And I did cite areas that these monies could come from. And one of them was these lending agencies and these international agencies who have offered grant funding alongside loan funding. And I also said that on the debt relief side, some of our agreements did speak to if there is a catastrophic event in your country, debt repayments could be put on hold and these payments could be done differently. And I believe most of our debt instruments have that clause. So that is an area that the government could explore as well. So there are avenues, I believe, where we could attract funding. But again, a lot of that depends on your economy and what has been done in terms of management. These monies there is an insistence by these lending agencies and these funding agencies that a lot of these monies must be channeled into social programs as well. Because one of the things, Odette, that you're not hearing, and is not being discussed at all, is the impact of COVID on the psyche and the separation of people. I'm one that believes that COVID is going to increase the gap between those who have and those who do not have. And I don't like to use poverty because I think it's a degrading term to some degree, but I think the gap is going to widen, and we're not paying attention to the social impact of the people who are on the margins and who are in that category and will probably be further marginalized, and what will happen to them. And COVID, in the new normal, as Mr. Archibald indicated, when you look at what that new normal is going to be, it's going to center around businesses doing business so differently, using e-commerce platform, using your smartphones, using WhatsApp and all these different technologies to get business out there and to get customers to not come to your business place and transact business far away from you. Real estate, all of these people are looking to see how they could digitize their platforms to make work more efficient and less contact. So the people in those marginal groups who may not be able to retrain and who may not have access to the technology is going to be severely impacted. And I think that is a study that we have to engage in quickly. And opening up at the beaches helps the psyche as well. But we have to be responsible as to how we do what we do on the beach. But I say that just to say that there is a conversation that we need to start as to what the impact is going to be on that vulnerable group that is going to be, in my view, further marginalized by this new normal. And somebody just sent me a WhatsApp and said they were on the Western Coast tonight or this evening, and there were very few people on the Western Coast wearing masks and practicing social distancing. And that is the first day of the 5-day. So could you imagine if we don't discipline ourselves, we may lose our 5-day if people are not responsible.
I think there's on that subject of behavior, there's going to be an increase in violence. That's not my area, but I want to throw that out in my mind. Why? We are asking people, we seem to have lost or losing the ability to settle our differences by discussion. As soon as there's a difference, we seem to run to physical violence. And as people have to stay further away and social distancing and carry out meetings and everything by technology, I'm afraid that the closeness that we have had as people is going to be severed.
Well, we are social being, Pointy, and I agree with you. We are social beings. We normally like to touch and hug. And, I mean, Odette will confirm that in churches, Prime Minister spoke about churches in his speech, and the ability of Zooming and doing churches on electronic platform is not the same thing as being in the building, seeing your friend, having a conversation. It is a totally different experience because we are social beings by nature, and we need to come together and be with each other. Yep. I mean, to be very brutal and to be very ordinary. If we don't come together, we can't multiply. So we have to come together. We are social beings by nature. That is how God made us. So we are social beings. So the distancing and these new work methods is going to be a challenge. And I agree that psyche, the psychological impact, is something that has to be looked at and managed carefully.
Yeah, and we need to segue to a commercial break, but you're quite right that we're social beings. I had this episode this morning where there was a neighbor in the community who passed on, and there's this elderly lady that has been really good to me, and the immediate thing is like, accept my sympathy, and all her children, there's like, oh, listen, please, I don't have COVID, I need to hug your mommy, please. And they're like, you're sure? So I had to get permission, and then I saw this friend not too long ago in Grandlands. She had been away for a while, and I just run up, it's like, it's so good to see you. And it's like, oh gosh, Lord, I'm sorry, you have to apologize now for hugging people. But yeah, it is a critical point. We will take a commercial break and we'll be coming right back. We want to look at the NIS unemployment benefit as proposed. There are no details yet. That's something we want to look at, and the stimulus package, and to see how it's panning out. But we also have to entertain some calls, and I realize it's already 9:30. So this is Beyond the Headlines. Do stay with us. Richard, Lord, and Trinidad, we're looking forward to hearing your questions tonight. We notice that you're on. Do stay with us.
How going on, boy?
Hey, good old things.
Hey, easy.
Yeah.
Boy, in line, boy. Your house looking a real good day.
Boy, it's thanks to the hard-working and professional staff at the Housing Authority of Grenada. They handled me real nice. They did my plan, they did the construction, and I didn't even have to worry about a thing. They were there with me every step of the way, supervising the job, asking me about my concerns, giving me feedback as the house took shape. They were there from start to finish, and even put the keys in the palm of my hand. I give them an A++ for customer service.
Oh, it's people from housing bad, boy.
Boy, not bad. Excellent. If you're thinking about constructing your home, why not consult the Housing Authority of Grenada? You could visit them right down in the Sandino complex, or give them a call, 440-1015 or 440-1016. Or check out their website, hag473.com. They go handle you. They go jog your blocks, they go draw your plan, they go tote your materials. Hey man, where you going? The Housing Authority of Grenada is your choice for affordable housing and a stress-free construction experience.
Total is one of the world's largest oil companies with a top quality line of lubricants. Total Lubricants has a full product line from passenger cars, motorcycle, heavy industrial equipment, mining, trucking, agriculture, and manufacturing machines and vehicles. Total Lubricants, winning championships in motorsports, including Formula One and World Rally Championships. Total Lubricants are available at all Rubis service stations, leading automotive shops, and distributed by Huggins.
Welcome back to Beyond the Headlines. We will soon be opening the phone lines. The number you can call, 440-1252. The number is on the screen, 440-1252. Peradventure, you're listening to us on the radio. And before the calls start coming, we just want to take a look, gentlemen, at two things. Relief for the unemployed. Mr. Diali, you mentioned the possibility of people getting laid off. Later this month, the National Insurance Scheme is expected to begin paying unemployment benefits. It's estimated that more than 5,000 people receive the benefits, and it will be disbursed over a period of 6 months. And we'll go to the other slide, which says the stimulus package. The application and verification process is ongoing and proving to be very time-consuming. Staff members working to ensure that applications are processed and payments are made. The government is also considering expanding the category of workers who are eligible for the income support. And so, Mr. Diali, the proposed unemployment benefits, we saw that put in place after Hurricane Ivan. Is some kind of special legislation required for this to take effect?
I'm not certain about the special legislation. I think the fact that the government have asked NIS to administer this is surely based on the database that NIS have of workers who will be registered with NIS, and I believe that will be the challenge. People who are not registered with NIS would not get access to that funding. I am of the opinion, I have been told that this money should start being made available to people from the 15th of this month, but of course, one of the criteria is that you have to be registered. So if, for example, you're a hairdresser with 2 employees, and you have not been paying NIS for your 2 employees, as self-employed people are expected to do by law, those 2 employees will have no access to that money that's going to become available. I also believe that based on what I'm hearing in terms of the monies with NIS, I think the monies have to be, in my humble opinion, either doubled or tripled in order that people could get a reasonable sum for them to carry them for the month. And the Prime Minister's, the fact that he was talking about expanding the base for people to get more, to reach a greater strata of people is important. But in fair to do that, more monies have to come to the NIS to be making that available. In relation to the processing of applications for the $30 million that was offered to the tourism sector, again, one of the challenges we face here, Odette, on the administrative side is that a lot of people are not registered in the system. So, for example, you may have a lot of taxi drivers that are not part of associations. So there is no way to determine when a taxi driver comes in if what they're saying is that they're part of the system or not, or if you're just freelancing and what is happening. And so there is a real challenge to get people as part of the associations and to administer what the government has to administer in terms of relief and income support. So that delays the process as well. And of course, businesses who apply have to send in the requisite data and to ensure that these calculations, because remember the government is offering base pay support. So for example, workers in the hotels who get service charge, that wouldn't be part of the calculation as far as I understand it. And it's going to be particularly on base pay and a percentage of that base pay. So these calculations have to be brought in and done and access and then the funding be paid. I'm told that at least 2,000 people have been paid. I don't know if it was in the Prime Minister's speech, I can't remember. But a lot of people are still complaining that there are issues with requests being made and they have not met the request yet. And I suspect the Secretariat is overwhelmed with all the work that is required. So I suppose people just have to have some patience.
I think the delay, as you quite rightly said, Chris, is the lack of data and the verification of data. People are not registered when they should be registered at NIS. A lot of taxi drivers don't belong to an association. So the collection of the names and who they are, and et cetera, is what is delaying that process. And as you quite rightly said, the Secretariat is overwhelmed. And people are going to have to wait while these things are sorted out. You can't just pay the money out. But there's a recognition though by the government, by the Prime Minister, that the package was a first step, and that they're looking at step 2 and maybe even step 3. That was the first step. You in your speech recommended that the amount be doubled, and that might very well have to be done. But there is a recognition that what was put on the table was really the first step, and that more will happen.
And Chris, we want to hear what you have been hearing through the grapevine. We hear you hinting that you think what the NIS is offering might have to be doubled and tripled. But we have a call on the line. We're giving you time to munch on whether you want to squeak on what you heard through the grapevine. We want to know. We have a caller. Good evening. Hello. Caller, good evening. You are live on Beyond the Headlines.
Yeah, good night to you and your guests. I kind of joined late, so I'm really 100% au fait. But I just want to ask the question. In relation to the monies that have been paid by NIS, because I know I hear Keith Mitchell talk about monies that they're getting for here, there, and then you hear people saying, is the NIS money that will be paying. You see, what I'm saying, I don't have no problem in NIS paying something, but I want to tell the government they must realize that the NIS really is a social security organization, and I'm really concerned about the pension for long term. And of course, I know the NIS is kind of a solid, but I'm saying to you, I know also that the NIS lost millions of dollars in British American and Clico, where they haven't got back as yet. So I am really concerned about the monies that the NIS will have to be paying to these people. While I'm kind of in agreement with the government in a kind of way, because I mean the people are hurting and you need to pay them. Right, and NIS, I know, is really not an unemployment agency. It's really to do with our pensions, and I'm really, really concerned about that. So the monies that Keith Mitchell should be getting from the loans and so that he should be getting, probably that is where the money should be coming from to pay all these amount of people.
All right, thank you so much, caller, for that observation. And just to let our callers know that we hold no brief for any particular official, but on Beyond the Headlines and on GBN programs, we do ask our callers and viewers to pay respect to the positions and authority of persons in authority. Mr. Diali or Mr. Archibald, you want to address that?
What I would say to the caller is that based on my understanding of the monies that are made available by NIS and will be made available, will not interfere with the NIS in terms of its viability. And NIS will still be a solid social security program for the pensioners and all the other benefits that NIS currently pay under their various programs. But as with everything else, it is not an endless pot. And the more that you have that could come into the pot, is the better the relief can be given to the average person who seeks it. And that is why I'm saying that NIS may contribute some, government may contribute some, and we may get from lending agencies to contribute some. Because one of the things with these lending agencies is the social programs of the country must not be put in jeopardy so that you could get social uprising and strange things happening in terms of how people behave. So I think there is a serious focus on that, but just to let the caller be comfortable in her mind that the monies that I am being told is going to be made available will in no way jeopardize the viability of the NIS.
Good. We have another caller. Caller, good evening and welcome.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
I just want to say the last caller, she needs to have some respect. For the Prime Minister, she always does it. She definitely needs to put a plaster on her mouth. That the Prime Minister does not keep me chair, but it's the Prime Minister. Every voice she calls, she has no respect for nobody. She needs to stop calling the radio station and well, no word for it. She needs to do something better than that. She's a sensible woman.
All right, thank you so much. And we did make that point that on GBN programs, we expect people to address people properly based on their titles. So, Mr. Archibald, one of the questions, people are looking down the road and they're saying, if you're getting assistance from the IMF, from the ECCB, from all of these agencies, at some point, should we look forward to increased taxation and other measures to pay back for the funds that are being forward advanced?
We all hope not. We all hope not, but government revenues have to come from somewhere. So, I can't project what is going to happen a year from now, but we all hope not. I don't think at this stage government is looking or should be looking at the increase in any particular taxes. But again, we are facing a very, very serious situation, and government's options are limited. One of government's options is increased taxation. So while I would prefer not to see that, and I hope that that is not, government will not have to resort to that, the situation we are facing, people need to understand, is really, really difficult. Yeah. And again, government does not have too many options, but I hope not.
Yeah.
Let me add to that point and to just say to you, Odette, and the rest that I don't believe increased taxation rate is going to accomplish anything, because if you were getting $10 and your rate was 5%, if you're not getting $10 and reduce to $5 and you put your rate up to 15%, you're still in getting the revenues that you want. So the real issue here is generating economic activity, even at the current rates, to increase your revenue. This is about volumes. It's not about rate increase and to push the economy into a place where it stagnates. It's about creating economic activity that increases volume so that the current rates could bring in the necessary revenues. The issue is how to get the sectors of the economy that are severely impacted working again, or if not working, what could we substitute that could bring in the revenues for the government? And that is where we have to put our collective imaginations and intellect to see how all of us could assist the government in coming up with strategies that could work, that could give people employment, create economic activity, and give government the necessary taxes that they need to run the country.
We have a caller on the line. Caller, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, and good evening to your learned guest. I do appreciate the fact that your guests are articulating on the economic impact as well as the social impact. But can they also give some sort of credence to what will happen when schools do reopen? Thanks.
I don't know if I should throw that one to Mr. Archibald.
But I'm not so sure what will happen when schools reopen. I think the fact that a lot of the classrooms, a lot of the teaching and the learning is now going on online is going to have some impact on the way schools are conducted and run in the future. I won't attempt to say that, to try and guess what that would be. But I think both in the case of SGU and in our own education system, if the trial and the testing that is going on right now and the teaching by online methods using the new technology works very well, and there are challenges, works very well, it must have an impact on the way students learn and the way students are taught on the way going forward. But I would not attempt to predict what that would be.
Okay, and we have another caller. Caller, good evening, and it's great to have you with us this evening. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, please go right ahead.
Yes. Yes, hello?
Yes, please go ahead. We're hearing you.
Okay, yes. Tonight I can see that... Hello? That I've learned a lot from Mr. Archibald and Mr. Yali. And yes, I appreciate the contribution you're all making, sir. And to enlighten the people of to enlighten the public of the nation how things will go through this hard time, COVID-19.
Okay, so the caller...
Thank you, caller. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Odette, I just wanted to add one thing with the education thing. I think the biggest challenge for us in education is not so much what we and how the education learning will change, which I think it will change forever with the online learning that we have. But I think the biggest challenge for the powers that be in education is how to get students to school. The transportation issue with not creating the risks of transfer of this COVID virus. And I think that is a real problem here, because a lot of children use the bus system to get to school. It's not so much how we teach, whether it's electronic or not. I think that is a permanent change coming, but it's getting them to the facility.
And we have another caller, but let me ask the caller to be patient a little bit, because we have been trying to speak a little bit about the agricultural sector and the small businesses sector and how these are very significant and how these are being impacted. Mr. Archibald, I want to toss that one to you.
Well, the agricultural sector, I want to make a special appeal for that agricultural sector, because I think we have looked at the agricultural sector in traditional ways for too long. I think this is an opportunity to really look at the agricultural sector strategically, look at it differently. We have to do two things. We have to first and foremost see how we can get the sector moving again, which is the immediate priority. And I think government has already made some decisions along those lines. But I think we have to stop looking at agriculture in the way we have looked at it traditionally and start looking at it strategically down the road. Where should this agricultural sector be 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? Because I think it could be one of the sectors that could be much more important or regain its strength and its importance in our economy if it is handled correctly. And we have people around who can really contribute, like Dr. Duncan Campbell and Gada Marcel and these people, who are looking at agriculture in a new way. We need to look at agriculture as a business. I find my problem is the way in which the sector is looked at, the way in which the people involved in the sector are viewed, and the way the sector itself is handled needs to change dramatically. Are we growing the right crops? Where should we grow the crops? What's the quality of soil we have? Who should be involved in the agricultural sector? We still have the majority of people in the sector of a certain age. How do we get younger people back in the sector? We need to stop thinking about the sector in the way in which we have been thinking of it all along and really have a long-term view as to where that sector should be and put our money where our mouth is. Too often you have heard, we must, how the saying goes, we must eat what we plant, etc., etc., etc. And we have had these little programs, and the program will last a month, trying to encourage people to eat locally. But none of these programs, in my mind, have been very successful or have been maintained for a long time. So I'm looking for a complete change in the way we approach it. Now, I don't know if government does this right now, but for instance, government can take the lead. In every institution that the government feeds or is involved with should be focused on, take the hospital. The food in the hospital should be all local. The food in the old people's home, the food in the poor people's home, the school feeding program. Maybe it is going on right now and I don't know, but the government could take the lead in that way. But also, how do we get through the education system, get the young people back and interested in agriculture? No young person is interested in agriculture in the way it is conducted now. You're going out there with a cutlass in the hot sun, with dirty clothes, that's how you're portrayed. So how do we bring new technology, new learning, new thinking into the agricultural sector? And I think we have an opportunity now to do that. There's the old saying about whenever there's a crisis, no crisis must be allowed to go to waste. This is a crisis. And the agriculture should be looked at as one of the most important sectors right now in taking the country forward.
Yeah, Mr. Archie, very crucial point there. We have a caller who's been very patient. Let's entertain them. I'm looking at the clock as well. We only have 5 minutes, so we're getting into wrap-up mode. I know we're waxing warm, but let's take this caller and then let's see if we can get some closing thoughts. Caller, good evening. It's so nice of you to have been patient.
Thank you very much. Hello?
Yes, please go right ahead. We're hearing you. Go ahead.
Good night to the two gentlemen, and very good point made. But my concern is persons that are lifting their prices and commodities. And I want to know what seriousness government will not talk, but what seriousness can government do to people who are lifting their prices to make more than what is expected, going above the price. And this talk about agriculture, we don't need talk agriculture, it has to be implemented agriculture, because what happens is that the commodities that will be for sale for agriculture must be properly marketed. But we must know where we go sell the crops that we will be producing, not just telling farmers to produce. There must be market for what is going to be produced, otherwise it will be just spinning top in mud. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Diali, I see you raring to go on that one.
Yeah, well, you know, interestingly, Odette, as chairman of marketing board, I have peculiar responsibility for agriculture to some extent and food security. So I heard the points Mr. Archibald make, and let me just assure you, Pointy, that in the background, Ministry of Agriculture and Marketing Board have been coming together to put together a plan that has been finished. It deals with short, medium, and long-term goals and what needs to be effective. We have come up with an action plan with monies and with people's name associated with the action plan to implement and to put agriculture on a footing that will give it the kind of prominence that it needs. We do have challenges, as you highlighted, in terms of age and to bring technology to bear. So part of the discussions is the use of greenhouses, the use of hydroponics, improving irrigation, putting greater acreage under cultivation. What are the crops that we're going to cultivate? Import substitution for vegetables and the vegetable groups that come into the island. And there is the aspect of poultry, pig farming, and animal rearing that is also part of that discussion. So we are advanced in terms of Ministry of Education and Marketing Board. I know a proposal has been done, and it will be going forward to Cabinet for their financing and consideration. So we have started that work. The bigger challenge for us in agriculture now is the nutmeg farmers and the cocoa farmers. in the cocoa industry, we have that industry fairly well developed to the point of value add. So a lot of the cocoa produced could be consumed in value add. We could expand the product line and the range for value add in the cocoa. However, we don't have that same situation in nutmeg. And you notice in the Prime Minister's speech, there's discussion about helping the nutmeg farmers, which are in a dire situation, and what we do there. And the nutmeg industry, in my view, have been very critical, needs to be transformed, particularly into value add, and what we could do there so that when a crisis like that hits us again, farmers could continue to sell their nutmeg and process it in value add products that could be used. So there are a lot of discussions around that field, and as I say, I have been integral in those discussions. The price control issue that the gentleman raised a while ago is a serious concern. You know, we were out of brown sugar recently, and there are some people in some supermarkets in some places that were selling a 2-pound packet of brown sugar for over $13 for the 2-pound packet. And that is a price control item. I know the police have the powers through customs and other agencies to deal with the price gouging issue. And again, I think the Prime Minister raised it in his speech. So there are instances like that, but they need the public's assistance. The public has to come and say to the authorities, listen, I just went and bought this item, and this is what is a price control item, and this is what it used to sell for, and look at what it's being sold for now. And deal with the people who are trying to exploit our people in this crisis. And I mean, that is a serious issue, and there's laws for us to deal with it. And we need to bring these people to the public and shame and name and shame them in the public, because it is a really unconscionable thing to be doing. So Mr. I just wanted to add those 2 comments in the caller's speech.
But Chris, I hope we, from what you're saying, that we're moving from paying lip service and really moving to get some new thinking into agriculture. Because one of the problems has been we keep saying things. And when I say we, I'm talking about all of us. All of us are involved. Government, private sector, everybody. But we have not shifted the thinking or changed the thinking in agriculture. The nutmeg industry is one of the classical examples. I spent a year or something like that on the nutmeg board. And it was one of my most difficult corporate experiences. And the nutmeg board and the way the nutmeg is handled is the same way it was handled 40 years ago. It hasn't changed. And I attempted to bring some new thinking, and the difficulty in trying to get some new thinking, you wouldn't imagine. And
one of the things I could say to that point, the action plan, that is why I wanted to see an action plan with figures next state and people names and timelines put to the action plan, so that you could have a plan to work towards. Mr.
Diali and Mr. Archibald, unfortunately, we're out of time. Can we book for Thursday morning on To The Point, so we can continue this very exciting discussion? Blossom Alexis Welch will be your host. I'm offering.
I just can't do it at 9 o'clock, as I told you.
Oh, Odette, yes, so you have those commitments, Mr. Archibald. So you might have to ride solo, Mr. Archibald.
Well, I would prefer if Mr. Diali is there. 9 o'clock is. Mr. Diali, what other time can you make it?
Mr. D, you could beg off one morning. You tell them you have national duty to attend to. Yeah, it's
I can ask for a big off.
And as we close tonight, just a notation that has come in here from the Government Information Service. I don't have my glasses tonight. The Ministry of Infrastructure Development, Public Utilities and Transport will facilitate a live press conference at 10 o'clock on Tuesday. The Minister for Infrastructure Development, the Honorable Gregory Bowen, will provide an update following the recent announcement by the Prime Minister of the resumption of work in the construction industry. Mr. Bowen will be joined by a representative from the Ministry of Health, who is also a member of the COVID-19 team. So, gentlemen, I suppose he will be giving information on the guidelines for construction, which both of you highlighted as a very crucial sector to generating some kind of uptick. So let me just say that we'll continue offline the discussion as to when we'll continue this. To the Point is available, Blossom Alexis Welch, and let me just say thank you to all of our facilitators who assisted us this morning to unpack the Prime Minister's speech of last night. We had the Honorable Minister of Trade with us this morning, Mr. Oliver Joseph. He was on Good Morning Grenada with Blossom Alexis Welch. We had Chartered Accountant Mr. Henry Joseph on To The Point, and now we've had our two distinguished gentlemen joining the two distinguished gentlemen of this morning throughout this day, helping GBN to do what it's responsibility is, and is to break down the issue so that the public can understand. To our callers who are still calling, unfortunately we are out of time, but we want to thank you sincerely for joining us. To those of you who just followed along, we say thank you so much to all of our producers who work behind the scenes to make tonight's program the great success that it has been. I tip my hats in your direction. Don Bailey, the assistant producer tonight, Darius Slocum, and we have Dane Williams in Master Control, Joseph McKee-Smith, and Godfrey Augustine, who work hard to bring us to this point. I say so long for now, thank you, and see you next week. Over and out.
Things you need to know about self-isolation. Stay home. If you are told to self-isolate, it means staying at home, not going to work, school, or other public places, and you should not have any visitors. Separate yourself. If you live with others, then you need to stay in a well-ventilated bedroom with the doors shut. If you have to share a bathroom, then use it after everyone else. Don't share towels and toiletries, as this may put others at risk. Call ahead. If you develop symptoms such as a fever or cough, then seek advice first by calling the Ministry of Health's hotline at 538-4787 or 458-4787. Please do not show up at a medical center or hospital, as this may put others at risk. Take care with waste. If you test positive, your waste should be double bagged and disposed of separately. Create a buddy system. If you live on your own, you can plan with friends and family to check in with each other and run essential errands if one becomes sick. Once sick, they should leave groceries on the doorstep. Why it's important. COVID-19 causes a mild illness for 4 out of 5 persons. Self-isolating will help protect the older generation and those who may have underlying health problems from getting infected.
The Grenada Food and Nutrition Council remind you to boost your immune system and give yourself a fighting chance against COVID-19. Consume